reached stage 4, the final stage, the very last little presentation we have for the Game Dunk 2022. Thank you for sticking it out with us, folks. It has been a wonderful ride, and we're seeing fantastic things happening with the event. Joining us here is, well, look, I would say she needs no introduction, but I'm going to do my level best. She is our speaker for the dead, our scout from beyond the Radiant Citadel, the blade you would like to see in the dark, Pam Punzalan. Welcome to Game Dunk.
Hello, nice to meet all of you.
Look, now that I've done the vaguely cryptic intro, did you did you want to give a quick self intro there, just so we can get like some sensible pins in the board?
I am a queer designer currently based in Manila. I will be moving to Toronto in September. Beyond game design, I also do editing and I do sensitivity reads and cultural consultancy. I also handle or used to handle like more actively community stuff. So for those of you who are familiar with the hashtag RPGC, I was one of the I was part of a larger group of people that really tried to push that hashtag forward for tabletop role playing games use. And I also, I'm not the one behind all the cool websites, right? I'm just that person telling people like there are a lot of games in Southeast Asia. So I've been designing and doing all this stuff since about 2019. And I guess that about sums up what I'm up to these days.
I appreciate you making the time for us. Yeah. So look, we've generated quite a bit of interest with your just throwing this out for the AMA. So should we dive straight in or?
Yeah,
All
I,
right.
I'm totally okay with answering. Most of the reasons why I wanted and ask me anything, I realize, is because I know that a lot of designers, whether they're new or not, or even if they're just into the hobby for the moment, tend to have a lot of questions about random things, and there aren't always a lot of answers, or when there are answers, they tend to generate more questions. So I'm not by far any kind of guru. I'm just somebody that's been at this for a relatively decent amount of time, so I'd be happy to like answer whatever.
Excellent. So look, there is a question that I lead in every AMA with, and we'll get to the serious ones after that, I do promise. But Pam, what's your favorite dinosaur?
Oh wow. Um, what is my favorite dinosaur? Triceratops.
Perfect. Hard to go wrong with a classic right there. But all right, so like getting on to the actually relevant questions. Look, you've come out with Logan here, and he's pulled up something from the like that has been bedeviling folks throughout the game jam today. How do you go about naming a tabletop role playing game?
Ah, um, gosh. You're about to hear a lot of ums and ahs.
That's all right.
Jeez.
I think that was the reaction we got from a lot of folks who've been trying to name their name their games throughout the day.
For me personally, uh, if there is a convenient reference that'll get a lot of people that'll catch attention, right? That's what I usually default towards. Like maybe it's better if I go into like concrete examples, right? The very first game I ever released was a micro RPG about taxi drivers in Manila. And the twist to the game, because that's usually how we do our design, right? We think of a concept, we put a twist in, and then we generate like either conflict or some kind of narrative interest in it, right? So my taxi driver game was okay, you're a taxi driver in Manila, but you're not just any taxi driver. You're a taxi driver that sees ghosts. So your job is to either ferry the living or the dead or both. And the thing that taxi drivers say down here is ma'am, sir, saan po kayo? And they say ma'am, sir because it's a really cute way of saying ma'am and sir, but they truncate it, so they turn it into one word. Ma'am, sir, saan po kayo? And saan po kayo means where are you going? So that's why I decided to name the game Ma'am Sir, saan po kayo? Because that is the question that you usually get with taxi drivers. So for a Filipino audience, they'll immediately understand, oh, okay, this is some kind of taxi game. For a more international audience, they'd be like, what does that mean? And perhaps they'll get interested when they start. So I guess that's like kind of how I name things. Like if there is like that one concept, hook, or reference that seems integral to your design, or even just a cute in joke that works for you and the few people that you may have written this game for, that's what you name your game. Naming is honestly one of the hardest parts, though. So I would not be surprised if you have an entire manuscript and you haven't thought of a name yet. That's okay. Doesn't make you a bad designer. It just makes you human. But I guess that's how I'd respond to it.
Yeah, fair enough. I guess on that note, particularly with a lot of the, I suppose, increasing internationalism we're seeing with games, have you found that like when you pitch someone a game that, well, the title isn't in their own local language, is that like a barrier, or are folks sort of intrigued by it?
I well, the thing with me, and I'm not going to speak for everybody, is that I don't really care if somebody sees it as a barrier or not. Because for me, if you see it as a barrier, then perhaps this game wasn't for you. And we can both
Mm,
walk
mm,
away from this exchange. You can move on with your life and pick games that you won't get intimidated by immediately just from the title. And I can continue designing for my specific audiences, right?
mm,
So um I don't I don't think it should be a problem. I understand that other folks may want to come up with, I guess, more neutral names, and that's totally okay because we all understand that at present tabletop spaces are not as diverse or inclusive as most people hope, and that is a life work, right? Like we're not. I'm likely not going to see tomorrow where games are suddenly the most diverse, the most rainbow, the most everything. I don't think that's going to happen in my lifetime. I hope it will, but it's uh, who knows really, right?
mm,
So it's not. I honestly don't care if I decide
mm,
by my design that the name of the game must be in my language to drive home a point. I will do that. I'll provide a translation as much as possible. I'll provide contextualization to those who need it, but my thinking is perhaps if the title alone becomes a barrier to even encountering my game or choosing to encounter my game, then you're not ready to read my work yet. Is how I look
mm.
at it.
Good attitude to have.
Mm.
We've got one coming in from V here. What are some common pitfalls in community building in RPG spaces?
Uh, uh, we can be here until next
We
century.
we got you over the grill now, don't we?
Common pitfalls. Um, I'd like to fundamentally believe that everybody who walks into a community space is a good person. But when I say good person, I will also premise that on the reality that, at least in my opinion, there are no good people and there are no bad people. You only create the idea of a good person through a consistent series of good actions. So, the common pitfall I find with any kind of community space is the natural reaction we all have when we realize that some of our actions or words may be harmful to other people is defensiveness. So the inability to be humble, I suppose, and also be accountable and realize that even without meaning to, you can harm somebody can create some serious problems in community building and community management. I think that's my number one thing. The fact that many of us um, are not humble enough and not sensitive enough that to reckon with a common space where you will meet people who don't agree with you. You will meet people who are not as privileged as yourself, and you will also meet people who are actually capable of educating you in things that you thought you knew. That already creates like a lot of tension. And the other thing that I find with community management that is an issue for me is a lot of people expect community leaders and community managers to just always be on the go and on call for managing everything, right down to your feelings. But in actuality, it's not supposed to be our job to micromanage you to a level that we have to remind you constantly about the rules. We have to walk you through your feelings. We have to basically be your therapist, your nanny, your best friend, all at the same time. That's not how it works, right? Even when you're paid to do community management, you will end up doing a lot of unpaid labor. Few people in who are part of communal spaces truly understand the depth and breadth of that responsibility. And few people will be able again to reckon with the fact that community managers are also human. They can also make mistakes. They also have their own frailties and they also get tired. So I guess those are like my big two, right? The fact that a lot of people don't really have the humility, the ability to be humble, and the ability to be accountable for themselves. And a lot of other people think that community managers are just there to take all of your shit. Honestly, community managers are probably the most salty people you'll ever meet, even if we look very, very pleasant and are capable of smiling and laughing. But that's usually because we've seen some stuff, right?
Mm.
And yet it's a constant decision, at least for me, every day to look at the spaces that I manage and go, can I still do this? Am I still the right person for the job? That's a decision that you make every day if you want to be a good community manager. And also the last question, of course, that you have to encounter is am I okay with being wrong and stepping down if I realize that I'm not the manager or leader that this space needs? Because that's also very important. So that's a whole lot of words for like one question. But yeah.
No, and I think it's really valuable stuff. I mean, I think the theme we have seen throughout today, like with our previous speakers as well, is just the actual mechanical elements of building sort of sustainable groups and egalitarian groups where they don't fall. It's not a perfect process, but I think the fact that we're all engaging with it shows that it is like important.
It,
Sort of going. Go on, yeah.
oh no, that I was just gonna say it is. It is very
Hmm.
important.
But yeah. Look, got another question here, and this is sort of more coming down into like I guess personal process. With your own designs. What are some ways you keep yourself creative?
Ah, how I like to how I like to keep myself creative, I guess. Although I prefer to word it more as how do I give myself space to breathe? Because I think all designers are inherently creative, no matter what happens to them. We just end up, of course. Okay, the thing with the creative process is that you become vulnerable, and that vulnerability will mean that your heart is basically open for anyone else to see when you create something. And for me, at least, this also applies to commissioned work. You put yourself out there, and that vulnerability can make you hurt when certain comments come in, or it'll make you wonder if you see someone else being so-called more creative than you or producing more than you do in your opinion. That can create some really really ill feelings and a lot of insecurity, right? So how I prefer to frame it is it's less about keeping myself creative and more about giving myself time to breathe. My personal ways of doing this is I have a really set regimen now as a freelancer. Like I actually follow office hours. So Monday to Friday are the only times I work on my commissions, even if I'm falling behind. And it'll only be from the time I wake up, which is usually anywhere between 9 to 1, depending on how things go. And then I do a hard stop at 6. And if since I've trained my brain that way, that means that I'm already looking for something else to do that will let me recover by the time dinner comes around. And I feel that that's a lot healthier than letting myself constantly bleed over pages, whether it's my own personal work or whether it's a commissioned work, right? Um, I I don't want to give any trite answers like I watch a lot of stuff or I read a lot of things, right? Mostly if you're a freelancer, you just don't have time anymore. You have to choose what you like doing. And personally, one big thing that I've found really nice is I'm going back into fandom because I used to be a really really big anime fan, or used to really go into video game worlds. So my big fandom of choice right now is really Final Fantasy 14, and that helps me recharge because it's a virtual world where I could just lose myself, not think about commissions, not think about this or that, and it's in that wandering that I'm able to come up with more designs rather than constantly staring at the same pages. I also like watching, I guess, a lot of things. I'm totally into K drama these days, and I also like arranging music because music helps my creative process. So I have like a heck ton of Spotify playlists where I just find music and I try to match the aesthetics to what I'm designing. So I guess that's my answer to that one.
Yeah, I sort of, I guess you sort of nailed the tension of when the creative industry becomes a job, and
Yeah,
I guess the
yeah,
vulnerability of that has to be commodified. It's a tough
mhm,
situation, but yeah, I think you're right. In giving yourself that space, it becomes
mhm,
absolutely vital.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and another I guess technical here. Is there a game design element that you've encountered that's really blown your mind? Like, what is there any that sort of really surprised you? Sort of made you see that in a new way.
Um, Honestly, whenever I read anything new, anything. And when I say new, I mean by my standards, such that I haven't encountered this particular system yet, or I haven't encountered that kind of setting. It always blows my mind because like I said, right? Someone else's design is their heart on those pages. That is their lived experience, whether they're willfully aware of it or not. So, like I like being able to read things that come from totally out of nowhere from me, and I'm also a firm believer that regardless of how so-called trad the system is, or whether it's just another D&D thing or not, you can always find value. And sometimes that value could be as simple as somebody describing something that you didn't think you'd be able to see. Or like it could be a single line, it could be a title, it could be a particular way that they decided to roll their dice. So and of course, admittedly, I'd like to premise this with, because I've been so busy doing the design work, I haven't really been that on top of consuming new things lately because I'm really busy recharging, right? So there's that. But in general, I'm always perpetually blown away by whatever I get to read, whether it's a so-called small indie game, or like a new way of thinking of a mechanic, or a new way of describing something as simple as hit points in a 5e game.
Yeah, I suppose it's always interesting to see a new perspective on something familiar, isn't it?
It is, and it's one of the things, one of the only takeaways of value that I had when I was doing my master's degree down here is the ability to be intellectually humble. Never walk towards something that you seek to consume, like something creative that you seek to consume, with the mindset of I'm better than this thing. You don't know that yet. You don't know if you're actually better. And the point was not to establish your superiority. The point was to learn. If you take that perspective, I feel like you'll always find something really cool even in something absolutely shitty. You will take away something that is important to you, right? And that in
Mm.
itself is an educational experience. Even if that thing for me, okay, let's talk about the fact that once again I'm Filipino, right? There are a lot of white narratives out there. So even if I look at something absolutely horrible, horribly racist, or horribly bigoted, that in itself is a moment of like, okay, that's trash. Don't do that, right? So that's the other perspective that you can get. You'll always find something important, something useful.
Yeah, look, that's a really good. I guess the word, what's the word? Sort of like a philosophy of approach, I guess. Just at least, yeah, like the idea of giving something its chance.
Hmm.
But yeah, we've got another one coming in here that's I guess more towards like your own design ethos again. Um, what do you think it means for a game to be queer? What is a queer game to you? Because I know it's a big and clear part of your own methodology there.
I prefer to go more personal and less academic with my definition because um in literary terms, right, queerness is the fringe, the strange, the not typical. Like that's usually how a lot of literary conventions like to define queer. For me, um, a queer game is a questioning game. It is a game that is even in itself a work in progress. So it seeks to answer a question, perhaps by also putting forward more questions. And if it doesn't put forward more questions, it'll at least give you more perspectives and more ways of looking at a thing that once again you thought you knew. So that for me is like a queer game because um, queerness in itself, like as an identity for me, is also a constant act of questioning and affirming and reinventing and inventing, taking apart and putting it back together again. So I think a lot of my work, and you can kind of see, I guess, if like if you took my game, you put it across like timelines. If you took all my games, you put it across a timeline, you can kind of see how like at least for me, there was a huge ass process there from querying the themes to querying the mechanics to playing around with stuff. Like my first game was a quirky little taxi game, and right now I'm working on the Dagger Isles supplement, and that's like a constant questioning of okay, how will I as a Southeast Asian person with a Southeast Asian team take what most people view as a very Western game and create narratives that mean something to us and also be able to present that to other people who may not necessarily be Southeast Asian. So there's a whole lot of stuff that goes in there.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I think the questioning element, I think we do keep coming back to this, but just like the openness and the willingness to accept those questions within things is a really powerful thing.
Mhm.
Um, on a vaguely similar note there, like I feel like these two questions are kind of wrapped together. So
Okay.
I might just put them next to each other. So like what advice would you give to your younger self? And what advice would you give to a younger person getting into RPGs for the first time? And I'd be interested to see whether these are the same answer or not.
Oh, the advice I'd give to my younger self is start owning who you are more because what at least for my personal experience a lot of my life was spent for a very long time trying to fit into what other people wanted me to be, the perfect daughter, a good girl, a straight girl, and a upstanding Catholic Filipina. um, and I knew in my bones at the time that none of those things were what I was. And that gave me a lot of angst. So it took a long time for me to come to terms with that, with the fact that none of those labels work for me, and I have to make my own labels. Now, the best advice I think I could give to any young person trying to get into RPGs at the time is take no shit from anybody who wants to dish bullshit into your face, because you will get a lot of that. You get a lot of people questioning everything that you do. You get a lot of people being very, very mean, and you don't owe anybody who is disrespecting you to your face politeness. That don't bother with that. You will always meet your people as long as you're true to yourself. If you're happy with your own decisions and those closest to you approve of those decisions, then you're likely on the right track. And you don't have to be afraid of pleasing everybody. Or you don't have to be afraid, rather, of pissing off everyone, right? That some people are just going to be like that. So find the people that you're happy with, stick with them, and keep them close.
Very good advice, I think. Yeah. Yeah, that's we do have a few more kicking around, but no, look, and I think that's just a solid approach for life generally. I think you just, given the option, you don't want to associate with those that are not going to be good for you. And I think yeah, the sort of self knowledge is a really important part of that you touched on.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, look, I know you've had a really busy period sort of coming up to this, and it sounds like there's plenty more on the horizon. But is there anything in your creative space that you're really looking forward to in the near future? Well, I suppose that you're allowed to talk about with us.
I'm this makes me sound this makes me sound exactly my age, right? But like, I'm looking forward to taking a break. So I'm looking forward to.
That's a good
Uh,
thing to have. Yeah.
I mean, of course, I'm very excited about Dagger Isles. The playtests are finished, so now we're just waiting on a few more elements, and then we'll go into editing, and then it'll start going into all the cool fancy stuff. So I'm really looking forward to that, right? Like I was a big Blades in the Dark fan, and if you had talked to past Pam of like 2017, she wouldn't have ever imagined that she'd literally be designing an official supplement for Evil Hat. And that John Harper would be happy with it. Like, holy shit, right? So there's that. I'm also looking forward to when I have the brain space, being able to design a game for myself, like not paid for, not with a big publisher, just like putting out more random stuff in itch. Because I was able to do that a lot for a while. Then Radiant Citadel happened, and so did Hunter the Reckoning, and I really had to buckle down and put what I could into those works, right? And that took it. The work was worth it, mind you, but like work is still work. Especially if you're a freelancer, it's different when you can kind of just go, I have a cool idea. I'm gonna do the thing, right? And not worry if anybody likes it or not. So that's what I'm looking forward to. A break, getting to play more FF14, getting to pet my cats and other things.
Vitally important stuff. Yeah, that's oh, I've had another one come in that I think is good. But yeah, look, I think yeah, just we've mentioned before making space and just having that chance to recharge being super important. So yeah, that's yeah. Look, I think I'm getting to that age too. I do understand, but yeah. So look, we've got another good one in, and this is another sort of practical because you've got so much experience as an editor. It's always so nice to have a good editor on any project. But what do you have? Like, do you have any advice for someone editing their own work? And this may be
Oh,
in the context that these people need to get that work in by midnight tomorrow.
oh, editing your own work, right?
Yeah,
Mhm,
yeah.
mhm, mhm.
Like the jam has written on. But yeah, like practical tips. I think we can yeah take that. We can sort of like snip off that last bit if it makes it easier to answer
Oh, it's
because
okay. It's more
mm,
of if you're editing your own work, um, if you have the time, give yourself a day where you just completely ban yourself from looking at it. Just don't look at it. Pretend it doesn't exist for a day. Or if you don't have a day, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, like whatever. Like adjust the time frame according to how much time you have, right? Like give yourself time to not look at it because it's in the distance that you'll see or realize new things. And if you don't see or realize anything so-called new, at least you've given yourself breathing space, and that's very valuable because as a creative of any color, whether you are professional, I have issues with that, but like professional or freelancing or just doing this for fun or whatever, um, your most valuable tool is yourself. If you as a tool break down, you will not be able to create and you will not be happy. So space it out, walk away, do what you like for a bit, then come back to it, read it again. And then the next part of that is let it go. You have to let it go. Finished better than perfect. It's always the thing. I mean, you're gonna meet a lot of people. You're gonna be in that space of, but I have these new ideas. I need to do this. I need to do that. Like, no, no. If it's done, it's done. Just let it go. Put your new ideas in another space, or if you really want to, go back to this old project and then hanker down with those ideas later. But the point is to release it first so that it exists as its own thing, and that in itself is learning.
I mean that's vital survival skills right there. But yeah, like very well put. I'm sort of like agglomerating a couple here, but I'm interested to see what you make of it. Um, how do you like to paint a scene? Whether that's in your like experience as a gamer or as a writer, what are the sort of vital bits of information that you throw out to a person to really cement a scene in their heads?
First off, what I want to locate in a scene is the primary sensory experience. And it does not have to be visual, it can also be a smell. So, locating the most I guess, important scent note or visual note or audio note is of great importance to me. So if I wanted to emphasize, for example, that this character is an important character who stands out, and I want her to stand out in a wash of everything else around her, then I'll likely focus on her red dress. The fact that she is the only person wearing that specific shade of red in this standard crowd in a noisy part of Metro Manila. If I wanted to um, if I wanted to go into mood, I'd usually rely on, I guess, on hearing. So like the set, focusing on the sound of rain or a particular music that's playing. And if I wanted, I really like for horror though to go into smells. 'Cause smells are great. Like I think not a lot of people understand the power of smell, especially if you don't actually know what that smell is. So finding the right words for it would be pretty cool. Like if you wanted to go into it being pungent, or if you wanted to go into it being rotten, if you wanted to go into how it's strangely sweet, right? So that, I guess that's how I do it. Like you always focus on like that one important sensory note, and then you build the rest of your design around that note. Like you can do it either
Mm.
by um the philosophical term is coming to me, but like if you do it via negativa, like if you do it by showing that which it is not, right? So that red dress versus the wash of a noisy brown Metro Manila, right? Or the sound of rain versus this quiet room that we're in right now, right? So you could do it either by opposition, or you could do it by building upon what you already have. So
Yeah, I think, and I think smell in particular is like a bit of an underrated hero on that one because like so much of the reaction it generates is like instinctive and quite visceral. So,
it's also very cultural. I think that's another thing that a lot of
mm,
people fail to understand, right? The I don't know how I'd be able, for example, to talk about the unique smells. Oh, sorry, unique is not the word that I want to look for, but like the particular smells that come from our food, right? But I certainly wouldn't call it stinky, because for me, it's not stinky. It smells
mm,
great, right? So how then do, and that becomes another design exercise, right? At least for, especially for someone who um is not typically white or not typically privileged, understanding that your own language is informed by systems that may actually be harmful to you, like decolonizing yourself, and you'll never get it right the first time, and that's okay. It's just, work in progress. You work
mm.
towards being better, more humble, and more accountable to your lived experiences.
Yeah, and I think that's probably a really good point for us to be signing off on then. So look, we've got a, oh no, we've got one last minute. Have you got time for one more question, Pam? Now, look, I think a big part of this is a sort of big thank you for all the incredible insights. And look, yeah, and like a really good sort of through line on that's like resonated powerfully with everyone in the chat here. So, um, okay, that's interesting. This might be a bit of a leap and a bit metaphysical, but look, things have been a bit chaotic so far, and I really appreciate how well you kept up with this. So, do you think games also need space and breathing room to be? And what do you think that looks like?
mm, I think that we all need to. Okay, let me reword that because I realized that I could put it better. My ideal world for game spaces, whether they are spaces that we play in, or spaces that we work in, or spaces that we create in, because sometimes that Venn diagram, sometimes it doesn't, right? My ideal world would be if everybody could just fuck off into their own little happy islands of creation and not have to feel defensive, not have to feel like they will come under attack, and just occasionally come together when we find common interests, that would be perfect for giving games a space to breathe. There is so much about the tabletop industry that I do not know, I could never create for, I could never fully understand. And I actually find that super hella cool that I don't get, for example, how to do a journaling game. I madly, madly respect anybody who can because I can't do it. And I'm not going to be that bitch who goes like, that's not a game, because nobody gets to tell you what is a game and what is not a game. If you chose to make that thing a game, like you said, I created it, it's a game, I will take you at face value and go, okay, it's a game. I'm not going to tell you where are the mechanics, where's the system, where's the conflict, where's the whatever. I don't fucking know. You said it was a game, so it's a game, right? Like that for me is a breathing space. Like I do my thing, you do your thing. Sometimes we will come together, we will talk about things, we may agree, we may disagree, whichever, but then we'll both get to walk away. We'll both get to have our nice, happy, well, not happy, but our nice, safe spaces. And everybody's better for it because everyone managed to have that space.
Do you think that's how it manifests generally? Like, I think I can certainly see an element of that with like sort of like I guess the individual creative element, or
I think that there are still a lot of aspects of this hobby that like to try and colonize other aspects of the hobby. Like
mm,
I think that in general, more people need to learn that you don't need to be the number one authority. You don't need to be the only person who gets to talk about this. And you certainly don't have to be number one. This isn't a race. This isn't a marathon. These are just many different spaces with many different people, all with many different interests, doing a thing, and that happens to be under a very wide, often amalgamous umbrella of tabletop RPGs.
yeah, and I think the sort of diversity of that is a, really a really powerful thing, and often like a little underappreciated. And I'm just thinking about our particular little community here. The idea of like fighting and trying to drive people out to be number one, that's like that's fighting to the top of a very small hill.
Mhm.
I mean, I think even internationally, we're such a relatively compact hobby, so it's
We
such a
are.
strange thought. But I think you're right. I think some people do think that way, and like having the capacity to let that go becomes a really important thing.
Yeah, like honestly, what are you why are we all fighting? Is the thing,
Mm.
right? When there's actually like the pie is only so big right now. And there are many ways of encountering that. Either acknowledge that the pie is small and we must all share, or make your own goddamn pies and leave my pie alone. Right? Like it's that, right? Like
Yeah.
I don't need to like I one of the things that I used to encounter a lot when was first starting was a lot of people, very well intended, would say, "So will you be able to speak for Southeast Asian game designers?" And I'm like, "No, I can't even speak for most people in Manila. How could I do that for an entire region?" Right. It's just not
Yeah.
happening. And that's why websites like across RPGC exist. Because when my friend Mometo set that up, she wanted to create a space where people could just submit and she would quietly put the games up. She decided, I'm not a spokesperson, but I'm a repository. And I am hopefully one of many. Right. So from there you could branch out into other spaces, into other creators. And I'm pretty sure Mometos would be happy with that. The acknowledgement that here is a way to look into our world without deciding this is the number one Southeast Asian game or Southeast Asian repository person to go to. There should not be any spokespersons, nor should there be any gods or masters, right? We're just all people doing a thing.
That's sure a nice. That's sure a little phrase that I think resonates with us here. So look, again, massive thanks for coming, like giving us the time, Pam. Like this has been like it's been so good getting your thoughts on this. Yeah, look, I think yeah, I think that brings us to a really nice sort of conclusion there, and we've given a dang fine go on of of answering our audience's questions there. So look, thank you so much for digging in with this. Is there anything else that you'd like to sort of like share with the folks who are playing along at home, or like do you have anything to plug? Or I mean, we can get any sort of vitals into the show notes if you like. But
um, yeah, just well, y'all know where to find me. I got a Twitter. I'm ridiculously active there. If any of you play FF14, I am on Belmont. You're welcome to try to find me. I'm there most days, most
I,
hours.
I
So
think a
that's how
few
it.
folks are looking to take you up on that already. So
Yeah, I'm part of the so-called strange server because it's the oldest server in FF14. I main Dark Knight. I will be leaping into a Savage Prog. tonight. So wish me luck if you know what that means. If you don't know what that means, um, I'm basically gonna get hit in the face a lot fictionally across an hour and a half to try and get a boss down. So that's what savage raiding is. But yeah, find me on Balmung if you want to. Maybe we can play, especially since DC travels up. Other than that, unfortunately, my commissions are closed because, as I said, I need a break. But um, please look forward to Dagger Isle supplement. Please buy Radiant Citadel. It would mean a lot to the team behind it. And if you haven't checked out Hunter the Reckoning, please do so.
Yeah, I don't think I can give it better than that. Thanks again, Pam.
Of course. Thank you for having me.